A baby bear doesn't look like a future monster. It stumbles through the grass, it chases butterflies, it follows its mother with clumsy little steps. If you found one alone, you might even imagine taking it home. After all, humans once transformed wolves into loyal dogs. So why not bears? At first, the answer seems obvious. Because bears grow too big, too dangerous, too unpredictable. That explanation sounds convincing, yet it misses the real mystery. Thousands of years ago, someone almost certainly tried. Picture an Ice Age hunter returning to camp. Near a fallen tree, he hears quiet cries. A bear cub. Its mother is gone. He carries the cub home. The little bear grows up surrounded by people instead of forests. It learns familiar voices. It accepts food from human hands. It even plays beside children around the fire. For years, everything appears to work. The experiment feels like a success. Then the bear has cubs. That is where history quietly changes direction. Most people imagine the next chapter. Raise those cubs the same way. Repeat the process. Generation after generation, the bears become calmer. Eventually, they become another domestic animal. It sounds perfectly reasonable, yet it never happened. Not once. Somewhere between that first friendly bear and an entire population, something kept breaking the process. And that invisible barrier shaped civilization far more than sharp claws ever did. One animal can learn to trust humans. That does not mean its descendants will inherit the same behavior. Changing an individual is surprisingly easy. Changing a species is something entirely different. Dogs were not created because one wolf became friendly. Thousands of generations slowly shifted their instincts. Over time, puppies were born already better suited to living with people. They watched our faces. They followed our gestures. They sought attention before anyone trained them. The change became part of the species itself. Now return to the bear. Imagine raising one perfectly. Years pass. It becomes calm. It even seems gentle. Then its cubs arrive. Instead of starting where their parent finished, they pull you back toward the beginning. Suddenly, years of effort feel much smaller than they first appeared. That raises an even bigger question. If ancient people transformed wolves, sheep, cattle, and chickens over centuries, why didn't they simply keep trying with bears? Time was not the problem. Early farmers spent generations improving crops. Wild grasses slowly became wheat. Tiny fruits became orchards. Patience helped build civilization itself. So what made bears different? The answer was hidden long before humans built villages. Long before farming. Long before written history. Evolution had already given every species its own strategy for survival. Some strategies quietly matched life beside humans. Others pulled in the opposite direction. The difference was almost invisible. Yet it decided which animals would one day fill our farms, and which would forever remain beyond the edge of the fire. Imagine two villages beginning on the very same day. One decides to raise young goats, the other chooses bear cubs. At first, the difference is almost impossible to see. Both villages feed them, protect them, watch them grow. Then the years begin to separate their futures. The goats mature quickly. Soon they produce kids, then more kids. Within a few generations, a small herd has become a large one. Each new birth gives people another opportunity. Keep the calmest animals. Breed the healthiest. Ignore the most aggressive. Small improvements begin to stack together. Now look at the bears. Nothing moves that quickly. Many female bears do not produce their first cubs until they are several years old. After giving birth, they often spend 2 or 3 years raising those cubs before another litter arrives. By the time goats have already passed through several generations, a bear family may still be raising its first. Without anyone realizing it, time becomes the first obstacle. Domestication is not one great discovery. It is thousands of tiny improvements repeated over countless generations. Slow the cycle, and every improvement slows with it. But even that was only half the problem. Imagine watching wolves long before the first dog ever existed. They already lived in packs. They followed leaders. They defended one another. They hunted together. Cooperation was already part of their everyday lives. When the friendliest wolves began lingering near human camps, they were not entering a completely unfamiliar world. In many ways, they were joining another social group. Humans did not create that instinct. They simply built upon it. Bears followed a very different path. Most spend their lives alone. They hunt alone, travel alone, survive alone. They never evolved to depend on a group for survival. A bear can learn to trust one person. Its species never depended on trusting many. That difference is easy to overlook, yet it changes everything. History offers another surprising example. For thousands of years, people worked beside elephants. They carried armies, moved enormous stones, performed astonishing tasks. Even today, a trained elephant can form a remarkable bond with its handler. Yet elephants are still not truly domesticated. Each new generation must be trained almost from the beginning. The species itself has changed very little. By now, the puzzle seems solved. Bears reproduce slowly. They are naturally solitary. Surely that explains everything. Not quite. Ancient people faced one final question. It mattered more than patience, more than behavior, more than biology itself. Every winter, when food ran short, every family had to make the same calculation. Which animals earned the right to stay alive until spring? That quiet decision shaped the future of civilization far more than anyone could have imagined. Now return to those two villages. Winter finally arrives. The fields grow quiet. Food becomes scarce. Every mouth must justify itself. The goats begin giving something back. Milk feeds children long before meat is needed. Their skins become warm clothing. Their growing herd becomes a living reserve for the years ahead. Every new generation makes the village a little stronger. The bears tell a different story. They consume enormous amounts of food. They cannot be milked. They cannot pull a plow. They produce no wool. They rarely multiply. Even a calm bear gives surprisingly little in return. For a family fighting to survive, that difference outweighs every other advantage. Civilization was never built by keeping the strongest animals. It was built by keeping the most profitable ones. That quiet calculation shaped history. Generation after generation, people invested their time in species that repaid the effort. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens. Each generation became slightly easier to manage than the last. The changes accumulated so slowly that no one living at the time could have noticed them. Centuries later, the difference became impossible to ignore. No such path ever appeared for bears. Not because humans lacked imagination, not because they feared the challenge, but because every generation demanded more food, more time, and more risk than ancient societies could afford. The odds had been stacked long before the first village ever existed. Now think back to that tiny bear cub. It was never the true obstacle. It could recognize familiar faces, it could form bonds, it could even spend its entire life beside humans. But one remarkable animal could never rewrite the strategy its species had followed for millions of years. That is the hidden pattern behind this story. Humans did not simply choose the animals they liked. Nature had already narrowed the choices. The species that remained beside us shared a quiet advantage. They reproduced quickly. They adapted across generations. And they returned more than they consumed. The rest continued following a different evolutionary path. Not because they failed, because they were perfectly designed for another world. Once you notice that pattern, it begins appearing everywhere. Why horses transformed transportation while zebras never did. Why chickens became one of humanity's most successful partners while crocodiles remained wild. History often feels like a record of human choices. In reality, many of those choices were quietly limited by biology long before anyone made them. The biggest forces shaping civilization were often invisible. They worked silently across thousands of generations. And by the time humans believed they were choosing nature, nature had already chosen for them. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden rules behind everyday life, subscribe for more human evolution documentaries exploring the unseen forces that shaped civilization. And before you go, answer this in the comments. If you had lived 10,000 years ago, which wild animal would you have tried to domesticate first? And what invisible rule do you think would have stopped you?